Good evening, Wowos, and welcome to this inaugural Wowos Conversations. Um, these Wowos Conversations started because I basically identified a potential that we have as Wowos of great minds, and with those great minds, it's important that we harness that intellectual capacity, that wisdom, that um, what can I say? There are so many words to use, but let me for now use these two words. So we then are going to have a series of these conversations. There's no specific format. There is no agenda per se. So it's excuse me. It's basically you sharing your heart with Wowos and sharing some of your insights about anything and everything. But for this particular one, what I'd like to do, I'd like to ask you, Wongs, as the founder of Wowos, to maybe even start from there. Why did you form Wowos? What was the purpose? And what is the vision that you have for Wowos? And then thereafter you can talk about anything and everything. Sorry, anything and everything that is in your heart. As I said, we just want to get your heart. So I'm gonna now hand over to you. As you can hear, I'm struggling with my voice, so I don't want to be too much. And then once Wonga has done his talk, and then the other Wowos can pose questions or share their insights and comments. So I'll hand over to you then, Kreku. The platform is yours.
Thanks, Zibu. I must say you've caught me off guard here. But I can try. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for giving us this platform. I think we are privileged to have you amongst us. You were declared a best member of Wowos Club 2022. So you have done quite a number of work within the club. We truly appreciate your efforts, and this initiative, again coming from you, shows your leadership. I think it shows how dedicated you are in the group, and how you have always taken the responsibility on your shoulders. I was not comfortable to do this, but I decided, let me do it, because you asked me to do so. So I'm glad that there's no agenda, and that we're just, as you say, sharing our hearts. On the purpose and the vision of Wowos Club, we left that to the group. You will recall we started Wowos Club in 1999. I think in a discussion that I had with Rufilwe recently, when we decided to make those calls to each and every member, we spoke about how the whole concept of Wowos Club started. It became very clear to me that we come from far. I sent a message to Patrick today in Wowo's general club, I think the sports club as well, and the political club, where he was showing us a picture wearing our T-shirt. And it made me to realize that Patrick and I met 24 years ago. 24 years ago. With Johannes, Brandley, Sibungile Mahlangu, and others. It's a long list. So all these people, we more or less decided to start a Wowos group in an email fashion. We were at JCI in Randfontein back then. Remind me to tell you the story how I ended up in in Randfontein. It's quite an interesting story on its own. So back then, it was about getting together, networking, coming up with our goals and what we want to achieve. There were quite a number of goals. I mean, people wanted to open companies, people wanted to share knowledge. And you can't find such platforms in nowadays. Even if they are there, they tend to be dedicated only one thing and one thing only. What I like about Wowos is over the years, we have tried to also segment it into different cohorts. So if you like music, for example, you then stay in the music cohort. If you like religion, spiritual stuff, you'll probably be in the Wowo Spiritual Club. If you love motivational stuff, you'll probably land in the 5 a.m. club, or even the one that you run very well, Zibuse, which is the Wowo's motivational speaking or spiritual club. So those are the clubs that are there, that they have made members to remain solid and be committed to the club. But I think also over the years, we have managed to have personal relationships with some members. These are not even within the club, but outside the club, because you get to know someone, you're interested in that person, you then venture into a long life learning with this person. Again, remind me to tell you about the stories that happened with regards to relationships within Wowos Club. I mean, that chapter is a nice one to read as well within the club. So the purpose of the club is very clear to me. It is about, and I mean, even if you read what Batabile asked us to do, was we need to be members and not numbers. And even when she came with that slogan, it was very clear what we want to be. So we've got the purposes, the networking, the workplaces, we share stuff and all that. But very importantly is that you can't be just a number. You've got to be a member. And that membership is dominated by participating in conversation. It is dominated by saying, I'm willing to help another Wowo's member. It is about being there during tough times and terrible times. I mean, I can tell you the story of when I lost my mother. It was Jabu who flew down, and he arrived at home. And interesting enough, during that time, it was COVID time. So it was very difficult to manage and arrange funerals. So Jabu took over. You said, and by the way, by that time, people are scared of COVID. You go to wherever people are not willing to assist. So Jabu played an important role during that time. And again, Jabu is someone that I met in Pretoria Technikon. We are sitting outside. We are about to be interviewed. And I start the conversation, and one conversation leads to another. Many of the members I've never met. I have just had conversation via these technologies. Zibuse, I haven't met. But yeah, I think the vision for me for Wowos Club is to really ensure that we are a club because of the members, not the numbers. So it's not about, I was listening to TD Jakes this morning. It's not about having, I think when you look at people, they strive to have so many likes on Twitter, on Facebook. You strive for just that 40, as he puts it, right? You then say to yourself, I'm just going to work and dedicate my life into this 40 congregation, in his particular example. That over time became 40,000, or I don't know how many other people were there. And that is the philosophy that we should adapt to, is that whatever we're doing, we need to be dedicated and we need to commit. And that commitment, to me, people like Ditaba, Refilwe, Vatiso will go on in politics for a very long time. And driving that agenda of us understanding our Africanism. I don't want to use the race. I'll rather say Africanism, and how important it is for us to be Africans. If you look at the work of Refilwe, be it in the cooking, be it in the music, I said to the other day, we have to start having I'm willing to be your manager in music. Well, she's got a lovely voice, and I don't think she's exploiting that to her advantage. So all these people that I'm counting, and there are many, they have dedicated their lives into the survival of the club. They are not numbers, but they are members. And over the years, we've tried to reward these members in the best way we know how. Obviously, it is always difficult to reach out to everyone. But I like what you have done today and saying, let's just meet, let's have a conversation, and let's talk about anything that is in our hearts. And I truly appreciate that. I appreciate the effort that you have taken in advertising the group, in ensuring that we grow. For example, when Ditaba joined Wowos Club, I recall how he drove the parties that we used to have. He will host or send us to Thokozile and Pretoria Central. Or we'll go to Ramaisa in somewhere in Rustenburg. And all those events, they were quite interesting. And I'm fully aware that over the years, people have grown. But I think, and more especially for those guys who've been here for some time, it is important to pave the way for the ones who can then take over, who can then lead and ensure that the club, succeeds. And I'm gonna stop there on Wowos Club, Zibuse. But I want to answer your other question. What is in my heart at the moment? You probably know we recently launched the new cohort of the current case that is really attracted attention to South Africans. So we've got that going. Particularly in this case, it is about Dr. Nandipa and how she has been, shall we say, implicated in the whole case. So that is one area that is occupying my mind at the moment. But the other one is to continue doing what we are doing in the 5 a.m. club. The waking up at 5 o'clock every morning. I never knew that this is going to be difficult. It has been challenging since you asked us to start that group. And I thought it was going to be easy, but it has not been easy. So those are the two things that are occupying my mind at the moment. I'm still on and off when it comes to waking up at 5 o'clock, but I strive. You can't ignore those messages coming in, be it they are coming from Jabu at 5 a.m. or even you, Zibusa. So those are the things that are very important to me, and I really appreciate, and more especially those two cohorts and your motivational cohort. Nice things to wake up to and say, okay, let me reflect on these. And I try to also write every now and again, and I post it in our blog. So yeah, those are the three things that, and I'm excluding obviously the family and so forth, and how close they are to my heart. But in particular for Wowos Club, those are the three things. And I usually take off time and just follow the music cohort as well. I think Wandile is doing excellent work in ensuring that we get the latest music and not stuff that is played on radio. I think if we had to open a radio station, it will hit the waves. I'm telling you now. So there's quite a number of opportunities that I think we're not exploiting that we should. But I'm hoping that with time we will get there. Thanks for and I hope that addresses your questions.
Yes, it does. And I must say that I did not have, again, anything specific that I wanted us to address. And part of that also then means that the conversation is open and we can talk about anything and everything. And one thing that came to mind that I wanted to ask you was, in terms of Wowo, of Wonga, the father, Wonga, the husband, what does that look like? Who is Wonga the father? Who is Wonga the husband? Yeah, please unmute.
I was saying this is why I didn't want this conversation. It was to try and run away from such difficult questions. But I'm going to try it and answer them. I think Bongi has played an important role in my life. We have two kids, Akili and Alika, in that order. Alika, and I try to be as private as much as possible in our days. So I do not put too much of their pictures on social networks. If you do have their pictures, you'll probably be getting them either from Nomonda, my sister. But even myself, I do not usually post these pictures on social media. We've been going for some time now. And you recall that when we talked about, I think it was love and finding love, it was it must have been the music cohort.
That heated debate.
Repeat that again?
That heated debate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And back then it was arguing the fact that, love is very complicated. It's one of those phenomenon that is very, very complicated. I've been fortunate that I found that from Sbongile. And I'm glad that I did. We're trying to raise a family now. And it has been tough because I didn't have a dad. You probably know, I speak quite a lot about my mother. My dad was not there in my life. My mom and my dad separated when I was 6. So the work, for example, that you do in the Dads in the Picture, I follow it quite a lot. I might not be telling you that I'm joining in or I'm listening to the recording, but I enjoyed the recent one, for example, in Metro, where we were talking about our responsibility as dads. It is a concept that, particularly for Black people, it is a concept that we're still struggling with because we didn't have role models when it comes to raising these kids. We are walking around and guessing as we go along. So cohorts like the Wowos Men's Club still need to exploit and help and discuss these topics openly. Because some of these topics, we are not talking about them openly. So we tend, and I understand, because sometimes when you're in a cohort, you do not know and you do not want to divulge too much. But those are the challenges that we have. I struggled raising the 2 kids. There's no doubt in my mind. But I'm trying my best. It's just to ensure that you are there all the time. You make time to be there. It's difficult because you've got a career and you still need to also ensure that there's food on the table. So we are as much as divided as the general workers that left in millions and thousands and so forth, being moved from either from the Eastern Cape to the Central Transvaal back then, or even just the migration of movements of people and opportunities, finding jobs and so forth. So we need to look at how we can talk about these things and how we can learn from each other. So a kind of a mentorship coaching program is required. And as most especially those who have tried to maintain the status of having a family, raising kids and be dedicated to a one partner and so forth, we need to think about how are we going to help those coming behind us. I like, for example, the work that you did recently at Social Movie, where you were mentoring youngsters and showing them the way. But I think we need that even amongst ourselves as members, where we need to meet and have this kind of conversation, be it a men conference, a women's conference, where we can seriously talk about this. You know, I was having a conversation with Rafilwe, and her experience, for example, I just sat there and I was listening to her, and I asked her, I said, have you thought of actually helping other people about this? Because ours is to do that, Zibuse. Our time is gone. Whatever we're doing now, we're doing it for the children, we're doing it for the ones behind us. And that is why even in education, a sector that I'm really interested in, I usually say even at work, our time is gone. We need now to be focusing on the next cohort of people. And by looking at the numbers, I mean, you don't even have to go far. You can go within Wowos Club. If you look there and you say how many of our Wowos members are married, stable, and raising kids and so forth, you'll find that, and even those who have, they will tell you that they are struggling. So you have a situation where we still need to ensure that we support each other on such missions and vision. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Again, I was not looking for anything specific. And the reason also I brought up the question of Wonga as a husband and father is because sometimes I look at the number of Wowo's groups that you administer, and I ask myself, when do you get the time? You've got a career, you're a family man, you're a husband, and yet you've got all of these. And at times, I would find you being part of a debate along with Abu Vatiso and Abu Chabu. And for me, that always baffles me. I would sometimes just observe, and Vatiso, her resilience in debating. I think in Anochabu, they just don't get tired of each other. And I love that energy. And it's always civil, if I may put it that way. And I like that. Now, back onto a promise that you made about relationships within Wowos. Please do share. I made a note. Refile, by the way, Wonga also owes us a story.
Which one was that? Was that Mashia?
Was it Mashia?
Sorry, can you just repeat? I was just walking out quickly and then I heard you say something.
Yeah, no, I'm saying Wonga owes us a story. He said he was going to share, but he never did.
Some Masha.
Oh, yeah. Masha.
I thought so.
It was Masha.
Yeah.
He gave a bit of a highlight in a sentence like, oh no, she ran away with my heart, kind of, And yeah, you know, it's like he just gave a picture of it, you know, it was that thing, yeah. You give your all to someone and then they not necessarily valuing the relationship as much as you are at that point in time, which leaves you heartbroken. So that's the long and short of it that I caught from what we showed.
Okay. So thanks, Refila, for that reminder. So, Kleku, maybe we can start with the story of Masha and then, sorry, the relationships within Wowos.
Yeah, so you recall that that discussion happened in the music club. And the music club allows us to, you know, reflect on some of the songs. So you'll hear people, for example, throwing in some old kind of music every now and again. And what I like about that club is that they can send you the music and you can listen to it, or it can be a discussion about a particular artist and what they have achieved in their industry. In this particular instance, we were talking about our lovers and our first time we encountered love. And if you find most of the, if you go and do research on this, you'll find that your first lover is usually the most difficult person to break up with. And Mashiach comes in that sentence, and that here was being broken, and it took a very long time, Zibuza, to eventually get over it, and then you eventually find someone who can then conquer your heart again. I've been fortunate. I had that situation. But there's some people who struggle with this for a very, very long time, where they are still looking for someone even today. And that is why we started the Wowos Find That Special One. It was to try and pair up or open the space for people to eventually say, you know, imagine you're sitting virtually in a room and you are interested in Vatiswa because of how she writes and how she talks and so forth. And Wowo's Club allowed that platform. But it then became very bad where, unfortunately, in that process, you still have people who still want to exploit some members. So they don't go in genuinely in trying to find what they claim to want to find. Or others will say, well, I didn't mean that it will get this far, which sometimes happens, I understand. So we had those relationships in the past where they became very bad. And I was called in quite a number of times. Well, not a lot, but in one or two occasions, if not three, I was called in to now try and we find commonality and reconcile the two candidates. And it was not easy during that time because you are caught in between as a member because you probably like both of them. And that is the other thing that we probably need to have some kind of rules of engagement and what we should achieve and what we should not be doing. And that is why we then decided to open up the Wowos Find That Special One, where people can just go there and then make that move and say, I'm interested in so and so, or these are my characteristics, these are the things that I would like to get, match me up with a person. Those are the things that we have tried to achieve with regards to relationships. But I think if I can go back to the Mashia story, is I met her, I think it must have been standard 7 or something like that. And it was quite a long relationship with her as well. And eventually when I think I must have been in matric or so, getting a breakup with the whole thing, it can mess you up big time. And separations are always difficult to deal with. We've had some members as well who have gone through divorces, for example, and they will make contact with me. I don't have that experience. I've never experienced that. my experience is just breaking up with a girlfriend. But there's some people who had experience worse than me. And marriage can be very difficult to manage and really drive. And those are the things, Buso, we need to seriously exploit and explore as a group and say, is there someone here who has experienced divorce? Can we talk about it so that we can help those who are either going through it or about to go through it, or those who want to actually avoid it? Those are and we seriously need to talk about those things. I was hoping, for example, the Wowos Men's Club will do that. The Wowos Women's Club will talk about those difficult topics. We do get these topics in small batches around the Wowos, let's say Wowos Political Science Club. The current case, for example, of Dr. Nandipa, it touches on that as well. So you'll find people having those conversations, but I would like us to really explore it on a personal level, where I can say to someone, Zibuse, you are driving dads. How do I raise kids? It's because I've got a firstborn coming. Is there someone who can help me do that? So we need that kind of mentorship coaching to okay, so that we don't just become a club where we just get together, but we seriously become members and not numbers. I hope that answers your question.
You've said a mouthful, Teko, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your honesty as well. I think it's not an easy thing to have good intentions and create a platform that you're hoping that people will benefit from, and then they tend to misuse it. But that talks to the nature of a person, but not necessarily on the one who created it. And thank you for doing that. I consider you a visionary to have founded Wowo and able to create all of these different cohorts, because it segments the conversations to specific cohorts, not that you have one WhatsApp group where everything is happening all in one go. And now with that, I want us to jump into, again, no specific agenda, jump into politics. What's your view of, firstly, politics in general, and where we find ourselves as a country as it relates to politicians?
You know, one of the things that I wanted to do, I haven't had the time to do so, but you know, if I can be given a day or two, is for us to seriously know about Africa as a continent, the African politics. One of the things that I did was to enroll at the Ditaba Moeketsi school. It must have been a year or two back. I can't remember. And you know, my field is in IT. But I decided, let me venture into politics, a political science kind of, besides just reading about politics. And I was blown away by the scholars at UNISA in that Ditaba Moeketsi school. I did also enroll at the OR Tambo school, which is managed by the ANC. And I do also read quite a lot of grade 5, because Achilles is now grade 6. So I have been reading what they are reading in these, they call it the social science. So I read quite a lot of his books, and I pick up, it's like I enrolled him in this particular school because I wanted to go to that school, and I didn't go to that school. So it was my wish back then that I would like to go to this school, and everyone was going to that school. So he is in this school now. And I've been reading their material, and it has been such a blessing because it is like you are in grade 5 and you are doing the work. I can't, unfortunately, take all his subjects. So I'm focusing on social science, physical science, which they call natural science, and then the mathematics. Those are the 3 subjects that I'm interested in. But on this political science, there's one page that we have not created in Wowos Club. It is that page of the political science. We've got 2 cohorts on political science, the part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is where the debates are always at. Part 2 is very silent. And the reason we divided it was based on the vision that the other one is going to be more on a general approach. The other one will really focus on Africanism and how we go forward. So for me, it is important for Wowos to really try and, what's the word I'm looking for? Cross-functional skills, where you try and go outside the domain in what you are good at. And for me to go to political science, and that opened up when I attended the SANPED initiative, where they were grouping us with social scientists. And I sat down and I listened to these guys all over the continent. And I could realize that I do not know many of the things about Africa. So the African history is not there. And I argue that this is probably where, more especially South Africans, are struggling with, is that we only know our small country. And and this is not probably even our fault, but it was because of the education system. So we've got to start exploring what is happening across the continent as well, and try and find ways to take that and plow it within Wowos Club. I'll give you an example. We started a cohort called Wowos African Leadership Club. It was initially dedicated to, we're going to study and understand, for example, the conflicts in Africa and how these conflicts started and how they were resolved. So that's just one segment on it. Now, it is important for us to follow the politics of today, but I worry that we are not following the history of how we got here. So the page that I wanted to do is more or less what we did with the recent exercise that we did with the Ilima cohort, where it was the plant club initially, where we were encouraging people to start planting and plowing, in their gardens. But out of that cohort, what was nice about it is that the content that was coming in, it was ordinary Wowos members showing us how they are doing their gardens and how they are actually using the land, the soil, in making it productive for them, which is something that we seriously need to venture into. But I'll pause there on the plant part. But on the Wowos Club, what I find is that you've got people who are discussing, and they've got quite a lot of history of South Africa. But I don't see a lot of discussions on the African politics and ensuring that we understand our history in Africa rather than just South Africa. So I'm looking at the webpage, starting back taking us back to history of, we can even start here in South Africa if it needs be. And we truly understand, because there's such misinformation about how we, as Africans, we were trading, for example. It's as if there was no trade between Africans. So when you listen to people, which is not true. I mean, there was a lot of trading that was happening. and how people started moving within the continent. I'll give an example. The discussion that we had about they are foreigners, and they are asked people, can you define for me what is a foreigner? And the word foreigner was mainly used only to African blacks. They were not used to people who came from Europe, who landed in Cape Town. It was, and even today, I mean, when you listen to Wowos Club, there's still a number of them. They still don't see Africans outside South Africa as part and parcel of them. And I understand what's the word? The dimensions around what are the problems that we have in South Africa and people coming in and so forth. I'm not even discussing it. I'm discussing the fact that who is South African and who is not South African. And a clear example is what I had a discussion with Vatiswa around Transkei, Ciskei, and South Africa, and how the whole thing was made dirmakar to ensure that we are lost. So I made an example of I was born in Port Elizabeth, which is now Gqeberha, but my birth certificate says Ciskei. The government back then was purposely doing that to confuse and make sure that we are lost. And if you listen to the current case now of Besta and Nandipa and the origins of Besta, where it comes from, if you listen to the Home Affairs Minister, and you listen to the challenges that the current government has, it was simply because we have not thought carefully about what apartheid did to our systems. I'm not even talking about people, to our systems. And so how we process birth certificates, it was done in such a way that we really confuse them. And that is why we are lost today. It's simply because the impact of apartheid is I don't know how deep it is. It is seriously deep, Zibus. And what I find in Wowos Club, and especially in the Political Science Club, is that we are addressing it at superficial level. We're not willing to go deeper and understand the origins of the problems that we have. So there's a need for a serious schooling in us understanding politics. I hope I make sense. Thanks.
Yeah, you do make sense. Now, when you are touching up on the issue, Refilo invited, so you're welcome to join in anytime. When you mentioned that when we put the label foreigners on people as South Africans, we put it on Black South Africans. It's also something that I've also seen done, and you also hear it in America. It's going to be an Indian American, African American, and so on. But when it comes to the Caucasians, there's no such distinction. Whether it's a Greek, it's an Italian, there's never an Italian American. And that just goes to show how entrenched segregation is and how we continue being segregated as Black people. But the rot or the damage is too far deep that we have to start now, because if we don't start now, we're leaving it to our children to then start, and we're not giving them a head start. So we do need to give them that head start and say, this is how you see another fellow person who comes, who has a different inclination from you, who comes from a different country than you. Because trust me, if you and I were to cross the border and just go to a country as like Swaziland, we become foreigners. And if we ever wanted to taste what it's like to be called a foreigner, just cross the border into any of, especially the SADC countries. I don't want to go too far, but just those SADC countries, that's when you will get what it's like to be a foreigner. But when it comes,
just interject here quickly.
Please do.
I feel like it's unfair how as South Africans, it's like we removed from the rest of Africa. Have you heard us talking? It's like, oh yeah, I'm going into Africa. But you are Africa, So even the example of saying, look, if we were to cross into Swaziland, trust me, you get better treatment in Swaziland as a South African. In fact, they just take you in as one of their own than a Swazi coming into South Africa, And it's this thing that South Africans have. It's like, I don't know whether we see ourselves as better than the rest of Africa or what gives us that type of feeling and position, because we experienced oppression, man, worse than, for example, Swaziland ever had, and you're like, being someone that has really suffered like that, why would you want to treat your fellow Africans like they mean nothing? Do we hate each other so much that we want to reduce our fellow Africans? Is it coming maybe from a place of hurt that, as South Africans, we've been so demeaned as Africans that we don't even want to identify as African? Or what exactly is it? Because we've got this superiority about us, And I feel it's really unfair. You look at our policies even around, immigration. How now, for example, visa applications have been delayed. I would say deliberately, for the last 2 years. And what our stance is, it's like we're not immigrant friendly. It's like build South Africa on our own, but we forget that even our leaders were safe because other African countries took us in.
That's a valid point, Fifi. We do have that superiority complex about us as South Africans, and I fear that we are slowly becoming, if not have become, like the Americans. When I listened to you, Wonga, when you were saying that we are too focused in our own domestic politics, that we are unaware of what's going on in the rest of the African continent. The Americans are very good at knowing their own, but very ignorant about everybody else. So we do need to expand ourselves. We do need to kind of like take off that mask and be authentic and be Africans without seeing another as less of a person because they don't come from South Africa. It's said what Refile is also saying, that, visas have been, well, you suspect that it's been delayed intentionally, which obviously with the system that we have in South Africa, a visa application shouldn't be delayed for that long. So if it is delayed, it's for a particular purpose. And that takes me back to a question that I asked earlier, Wonga, the one of politicians. How much more can we rely on politicians to help solve the geopolitics, the micro and the macro politics? How much can we rely on politicians to making our quality of life better?
You'll recall that we started the Cadem. I'm trying to think of the member who came up with the concept. And it was simply because we were sick and tired of the current political parties. And I think that's why we have so many in South Africa. It's simply because there is a lack of politicians. And when I say lack of, in a sense of credible leadership. You know, there's a book that I'm reading at the moment. It's about servant leadership. Quite an interesting book on what type of leaders we should be having, most especially in politics. You join the politics simply because you want to serve the people. It's not the other way around, where you want to serve yourself. And that is the challenge that we have in South Africa, is that most of the politicians are not prepared whatsoever to serve the people. So very few of them, and I'm not putting a blanket on everyone, very few of them are joining in and saying, you know, I want to seriously solve the current problems facing the ordinary people. You know, Zibo, you and I, we are busy now talking on this platform, Zoom. The general population of this country do not have this platform. There's a lack of access to resources. Even if you have the cell phone, then you are challenged by data. It's expensive. So you and I, to even have this conversation going on for an hour, we're one of the privileged people in the country right now. And if we do not understand that, then I do not know. The people, as we speak, they can't gain access to this conversation, even those who have means, simply because they might be experiencing things like load shedding. It happens to them, and it is so frustrating that the general population has given up. It means basically, even if you are a good leader, no one is willing to listen to you. Even if you have a point that you want to make, no one is willing to listen to you because you have continuously disappointed these ordinary citizens. You know, I spend a lot of time talking to radio stations, and they will invite me to talk about how do we encourage matriculants to pass. How do we help grade 9s and grade 7s to understand these concepts of preparing for university and so forth? And when you listen to this conversation, it's quite sad, Zibu, because, you know, we were recently even talking about, we want to change the stance of our publications to radio and PR exercises, that we focus mainly on the most important topics. The fact that we need to talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution, the 5th Industrial Revolution, and so forth. You are unable to do that simply because the ordinary person on the ground does not have access to resources. When I was at SAP, we once did a project solely on access to resources. We call it ACTA project. It was quite sad to see how our general population don't have access to resources. And that is why I'm saying, for Wowo's political science club, we seriously need to consider things like, be it a movement of some kind or a political party, but this political party must be assembled in a means of scholarship. In other words, get the policies right, understand, teach, get people to understand the problems that are facing us before you even rush to want to get that political seat in parliament. Currently, as we speak, Everyone wants to open a political party simply because they just want to get a seat in the number of seats that are available in parliament. And that is where the problem is. There's no trust, there's no servant leadership in the current political domain in South Africa. We've got to find a way, you and I, and Wowos, in either we pave the way for that to happen. You know, Vasito says we are still young. We shouldn't be talking like this. But the truth is, we have to face reality, is that if we want to build the next leader, president, we should have already done so, because that person should be taught as we speak to become that leader in the next 5, 10 to 15 years, at an age of roughly 35. You can't be waiting for someone who is 56, 57, or 75, or 65 to run the country. We need someone young, dynamic, and fresh who can really take this country forward. And I think the solution might be lying to us to actually pave the way for such an environment.
Thank you, Kleku, for that. I just want to share these two comments from Vatis. The first one, she's talking about, it was on the point where we're talking about us as South Africans seeing ourselves as superior to others. And she says, it's not only South Africans who possess or show superiority. At the business front, our brothers and sisters from the rest of Africa see us as inferior. I felt so insulted when a 27-year-old in Kenya, for example, told me that we are still behind and we need to sit down and learn. As much as I felt it, there was some truth, but the way she said it was insultive. You know, one of the African countries that fascinate me is Rwanda. How in 1994, when we were going to the elections for our democratic dispensation, they were experiencing that genocide. But from that point to where they are today, they have done really well for themselves. Whereas we first progressed and then regressed. And that's where we are today. And it's going to be difficult if we still rely on the current political cohort. Now, in the next comment, she says, in her view, but my view is that as Africans, we need to acknowledge our different strengths and capitalize on those without undermining each other, but to build a continent. As a result of what that lady said to me, my response was defensive. Other Africans have no respect for governance and rule of law, which works in their favor. I was quick to point that out to her. Now, my comment on that, especially when it comes to governance, is that the kind of governance system that we have, the kind of ethics that we have, are they not serving, how can I put this? Are they not still serving the European way of thinking, the Western way of thinking? Because if you look at how their lives are, it's all about me, and the nucleus. Whereas as Africans, we are more communal. We are more inclusive. And therefore, one of the things that I'm starting to rethink is the current concept of corruption within politics. That if we looked at politics in the African context, where we as Africans define how we will do politics, would we not see things differently? Here's the thing. The recent revelations by the AJ unit, the investigative unit about the gold mafia, you see that those, especially African leaders, they've always got either their niece, their cousin, or somebody else in top positions. When you look at what the former president Jacob Zuma did, he got his son to do business with the Guptas. He got Ututu a position as, I think, a chief of staff somewhere. So we're able to place, we want to see our family members grow, or those closest to us grow.
Mm.
Yes, maybe how things are implemented is questionable. Sorry. But I think if we are to redefine corruption and redefine political ethics, we would see a lot of the things that we see now very differently.
Yeah. You know, Zibo, the level of corruption in the country is worrisome. We're currently facing things like load shedding, and we are still not able to resolve the load shedding simply because there's just corruption. You know, if you listen to or read the Wowo's Political Science Club, one of the things that you usually come across is how Wowos have given up. And I'm saying given up on the current political party, because here's an opportunity for the ANC to advance our people and ensure that they are successful, but they are just failing dismally. And I think one of the things that we seriously need to do as Wowos, it is to take some time and we drive the political education that is needed in the country. So it starts with you and I, Zibuse, at home, where we show our kids. I think it was Boppy, for example, in it must be the Wowo's Money Club, or it was, yes, it was Wowo's Money.
It's the Money Club.
Correct. So she demonstrated how she took the decision to leave the education system and go home schooling. Now, if we can get to that level where people are saying, I'm just sick and tired of not finding what I'm looking for in a particular sector, and therefore I'm willing to do this on my own. And I was hoping that the Cadell will be more or less trying to achieve that as a club in the political space. And that is why I said, let's start off by writing something that is going to guide us on how we will then venture into influencing, if needs be, these politicians to actually change. For me, it is clear this thing still boils back to the education system. The current people who are in government are not educated in just public administration. You know, if you're going to say to me, how do we redefine politics? We redefine by going back to the schools. We redefine it by ensuring that our content that we deliver to the students, it is seriously touching on these important topics. Currently, we talk about corruption, but it is at a superficial level. No one is actually doing something about ensuring that you find leaders that can be able to even distinguish between the two and seriously understand that, you know, ndingumntu ngabantu. So in other words, I cannot just define this only in my family and look after my family and my family only, but I've got to actually expand this to other people. And that's one of the things that we're trying to achieve with the Wowos Club, is that we are brought together not by where you come from, who you are, and what you are. In this space, we discuss things that are impacting us on a daily basis. The discussion of today started by someone saying, guys, my boy was getting 7 rand. Today I must give him 10 rand because things are now expensive. What do I do? And Poppy says, but there is a solution than to be looking at these private institutions or even looking at the public institutions. It is to seek the homeschooling system. And she gave us, I mean, it's one of the things that we must maybe have a conversation around is how does she do it? How does she manage to do this? Because we probably don't want to do it in our case because we are clouded by the what ifs and it's not going to happen, or I'm unable to, or I cannot afford. All those questions or stumbling blocks or what if scenarios are the things that are making us not to do what we want to achieve. And I think with regards to corruption, it is to seriously address it. And it is addressed by teaching, Zebuse, and talking about it and acting on it. I think Wowos Club seriously need to look at CADA. We need to look at the Wowos Money Club and ensure that we have speakers who can drive us and help us to achieve some of the things that we think we are not capable of doing. And most importantly, though, is I would like us to start documenting our work, be it on our vision, common understanding, to principles, rules of engagements, to various things that we can agree on and say, this is our working document and this is what we'd like to achieve. And I honestly believe sometimes even the Wowo's political science does influence some of these political parties, because some of the members that are there, by the way, are ANC members, for example. They are DA members. So when we are talking, they seriously take our conversations back to those parties and say, please change this, please change that. I'm fully aware that some of our members are EFF members, for example. So they do listen to us directly or indirectly on what we are talking about. And that is why when we discuss these things, we've got to influence and put those comments that me and you, feel strongly about so that they get it while they are in those political parties. I find sometimes we're not willing to discuss the corruption because it actually affects us as humans. It's a reflection most of the time of the people that we know, people that are our family members and so forth. And that is what is killing the discussion about corruption. It is not discussed, it's just put under the carpet. And that is why today it continues and continues and continues, and there's no stopping to it. If we had to all of us stand up and say, but what you're doing is wrong, you can't do A, B, and C. We seem not to be willing to do that. And that is our downfall as South Africans. Thanks.
Wow, you've said more than a mouthful. And thank you for that, Clip. I think what we'll do now is wrap the conversation up. And in wrapping it up, it's basically for you to share your reflection on the conversation and maybe set the tone for next conversations that may come, because I intentionally and specifically chose you for this first conversation because you are the founder, you are the one who initiated it. So I'll hand over to you to close.
Thanks, Ibu. I think for me, I need to maybe start by saying what I said earlier on. It is to truly appreciate your efforts in starting these kinds of conversations. And I'm saying that again, simply because Wowos, to me, as a whole, as a group, it has been a blessing in disguise because I benefit quite a lot in the group. I mentioned quite a number of cohorts that we have, be it 5 a.m., waking up and seriously reflecting on my day and saying, these are the things that I'm going to do. And in that 5 a.m. club, we are following Robin Sharma's 3 pockets, you know. First one is to move. The second one, it is about praying and really looking at how you are going to go forward on the day. And setting up a goals, which is your last one. setting up your goals and ensuring that these are the things that I want to achieve. So if you look at the Wowos Motivational Club, Spiritual Club, the 5 a.m. Club, these three cohorts, if our members are not in these three, I argue that you will battle to find direction even in perspective in your life if you are not in those three clubs. The first club, which is the 5 a.m. Club, wakes you up. The motivational club, which is mostly your morning thoughts in Wowo's Motivational Spiritual Club, are things that one can start with and say, I'm going to reflect and read and understand. So our priorities as Wowo's Club in 2023 are about personal development. And if anyone is interested, can look it up in our website, www.wowosclub.org. It is about personal development. It's so important for us to develop ourselves first before we can want to develop anyone else. To really understand ourselves, and I'm serious about that you're not just looking at this in one perspective, but you're looking at it in such a way that you know that you're going to make a difference. And that difference, you can make it within the cohort. Don't worry about it's just small numbers, because the numbers are going to speak for themselves in long term. It is about influencing one or two members, get them right, and that's it. And I think this conversation
It looks like we have lost Wonga. So what we'll do is close the conversation. But in closing the conversation, I'd like to say that it's been a pleasure hosting him. It's been a pleasure just listening to his insights. And it's just picking up his brain on these various topics. So what we'll do is we'll post this video on the different Wowos platforms. And in posting that, we will then share those with you. Okay, you're back, Pleku. You can unmute and maybe finish your thought.
All right. Sorry about that. I think I lost connection.
Yeah.
So maybe just a switch of roles where we have you as part of the conversation. But I would like to also see some discussions on the saving money tips, the work that Poppy was talking about today with regards to schooling system and homeschooling in particular. The others are probably around the touching subjects. I spoke about, for example, the matter of divorce and the lessons to be learned around that, how to prevent it, and so forth. So we can look at that as well. The other one that was very important to, or rather consider, to talk about is just around the research matters on some of the scholars within Wowos. We've got quite a number of people who are well educated as well. We've got the Wowos Research Club. Maybe we can pull some of the people there, let alone then the politics and the scholars in the political science. We can pull people there as well to deliver and have a conversation. But the last topic that you did at Radio Metro about fatherhood as well is very important. There was someone as well who wanted more information on it. So we can explore those topics, and I'm looking forward to such discussions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So you'll be happy to know that I think I had spoken to Upo Binai and she agreed to also be part of the conversations. And what we'll then do is she'll be the next guest, and we'll then have Enkuvatiswa, who's then going to share her heart as well with us. So there is a plan to just keep tackle the topics that you mentioned.
Beautiful. Excellent, my lead. That's lovely to hear. I'm
Yeah.
glad that that's gonna happen.
Yes. So with that said, Kleku, thank you for your time and just allowing yourself to just be with us tonight and just sharing your words of wisdom, your knowledge, your insights, and everything. Have a blessed evening and send our Iwini warm-hearted gratitude to the family.
Thank you so much. You too, Zibu. Pass my warm regards to your family as well. And thank you to everyone who also took some time. It's always difficult to find time in nowadays. So we appreciate those members who joined in. And I'm made to believe that you will share the recording as well. So for those guys who missed out, I'm sure we can send the recording to them. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck.
Sharp, boss.